everyone, welcome into LEAFline. We're glad you're joining us. Thanks for being here, and I am Brian Ralston, and Ben Aquina is across the way from me.
Hello.
And this, believe it or not, is most likely the last episode of this here podcast, so enjoy it. We sure have, and we're thankful for you being a part of it, and I'm thankful just to get to do this one last time. And there's a reason for that one last time. It's because Ben is finishing out his time with Centenary here this week. So we are recording this the first week of January, and Ben's last week as a staff member at Centenary, officially at least in the office. He's going to take a few weeks of vacation, well-earned vacation, to kind of pack up his house and get ready, and then he'll be done officially on the books at the end of January, I think, right?
That is accurate.
Yeah, so most likely this will be the end of our lovely podcast experience. Aww. But
didn't quite get to 40. This is number 39.
Yeah, so go and get your tissues out, your Kleenex, your hankies, and we'll try to make it an enjoyable experience as you sob your way through this last podcast. But we're not going to, because we really enjoyed it, and we want to make this last one strong and go out strong. So, yeah, that's the way we do it.
How about some strong updates?
Updates. Can I get an update?
Can I get an update?
So, the updates are kind of amusing because, well, they're all Brian connected somehow, which is really weird for me. But this Sunday, we have
for some reason, I don't have anything to tell you about my upcoming work at Centenary.
For some reason. So this Sunday, we have an online service, and that is going to be me bringing the old message. I'm going to be preaching, and it's because Pastor Tim and Gina are on a break right now, a vacation. They are
on a break from work.
They're on a break from work. Yes, that is a good way to put it. They are with their family, their daughter, their second youngest child.
She'll probably appreciate you not calling her the middle child.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that she's the middle child, but she kind of is. Actually, she got married this past Saturday in
Hooray!
Lake Tahoe area, and so the family is enjoying some time together, vacationing away in the Lake Tahoe vicinity. So we're giving them a week to enjoy, and then taking care of the service this Sunday. So tune in for that as usual on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. Or
Brian does the message this Sunday. Huzzah!
Indeed. And then coming up the next week, starting the week of January 11th and beyond, we're going to have some new discipleship opportunities coming up. Spirit Salon is going to be up and running again on January 13th. And they have made the grave error once again of inviting me to be the teacher and Bible guy. So I'll be bringing some Bible passages and some teaching every week starting the 13th.
They're going to regret that.
Oh, they always do. By February, they're really sick of me and throwing things at me. But we'll be doing it over Zoom again. And so that'll be a fun new adventure for all of us, me teaching over Zoom, because who knows how that's going to go. But that starts the 13th. And then we also have Vine groups starting up again. So if you've never been in a Vine group or you participated last fall or in December, we invite you to come back wherever you find yourself in that category. There's ways going to be sign up through the Leaf Brief the next few weeks, and those will be getting going here in January as well. And those are small group opportunities to do a little Bible study together over Zoom with some of your church family. So if you're interested in being a part of Vine Group, please sign up, and there'll be details coming out in Leaf Brief the next few weeks. Or you can email me or call me or contact me. That's fine too. So those are the updates.
Recommendations, give it a try.
I have a weird recommendation this week. What I've been reading and watching isn't all that interesting. Actually, you know what? I'm frustrated with Amazon Prime and IMDb streaming because they've stolen the endings of 2 movies from me in the last month. I think I mentioned before, my wife and I were watching The Gods Must Be Crazy. It got removed from Amazon Prime while we were still watching it. And then we were enjoying the Antonio Banderas movie. I think it's from the late 90s called The 13th Warrior. It's pretty much a retelling of Beowulf, except the sort of audience pathway into this story is an Arabic dignitary who ends up visiting the Northlands and getting tangled up with Vikings and ends up being part of their adventure. And it's a really, really fun movie. I think it's based on a Michael Crichton book. And we watched half of it in December, and then January 1st we decided to get back to it, and it had been removed from IMDb streaming. And so we're going to have to start... And we don't get any warnings that this movie's going away soon. It just suddenly disappears. So we're going to have to start being a little bit more intentional about getting that stuff done. I do have a give it a try, but do you have a what you're reading, what you're watching before I do that?
Similar amusing about things going away from streaming services. So some of you may have heard me yap about The West Wing at various points over the
Have you
years.
mentioned that show before?
Just once or twice. But Kathy and I find that to be our comfort food. Like some people go to their meat and potatoes, or whatever meal as their comfort food. Kathy and I go to West Wing as our comfort food for times of anxiety, stress, and just when you want to escape into something you know is reliable and good. And it has good memories because you watched it together many, many moons ago. So that's West Wing for us. So West Wing has been on Netflix for quite a while until it wasn't just recently. And so we actually went to watch West Wing one night when we really, really wanted some comfort food, and we had our dinner prepared, and we were just so excited to sit and watch West Wing together, and then he wasn't there anymore. But because I am son of John and Lynn Ralston, I prepared for such an eventuality because we have the entire series on DVD. Not just one copy, but 2 copies, because, you just can't be
There's
too
some
careful.
dishonesty in the way you're framing this story. Because it's not, oh, no, we can't watch it. Oh, wait, I prepared for this. You already had those box sets long before West Wing got put on Netflix. The truth of this story is you were super annoyed because now you have to get the disc out.
Exactly. I don't have to tell the whole truth. I just have to tell the truth. So
The part that makes you look good.
the part that makes me look good.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay, sorry.
It's spin, Ben. It's spin. Come on. Leave me some. It's West Wing. It's what I learned from West Wing. I learned
I'm sorry,
to spin.
forget I said it. Yeah.
No, I did have the sets a long time ago, as Ben helpfully pointed out. But yes, it was we don't have a DVD player hooked up anymore because
Oh, okay, that is annoying.
we had to go and figure that out, and we just didn't feel like doing that. So we still haven't done that. But yeah, we're fine. We can watch it on DVD. But yeah, it's just
You know what, though? I go
old
through that, too, because there's a
technology.
bunch of stuff that I have on disc that is streaming, and if I'm not able to watch it on streaming, I'm not willing to put the disc in because that's too much work.
Right, because we're lazy. We're streamers now. We're not disc people.
We've been ruined.
Yes. Just like I can't watch live like TV anymore because the commercials. I mean, you actually have to sit through commercials. You can't just zap them, or you can't just watch something that doesn't have commercials. No, you have to sit through commercials. Blah.
I do like what you said about West Wing, though, but it is a great palliative. And it's especially great. It makes me sad, though, to watch it during a modern election season.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know if we might have mentioned this on the show before. In one of the later seasons of the show, it depicts a presidential race between a Republican candidate and a Democrat candidate that I look at and say, I'd be so happy with either of these guys being president of our country.
Right.
And instead of what we've had for the last several elections where it's like, well,
Yeah.
which of these awful choices are we going to go with?
Yeah, am I going to vote for, let's see here, which horrible option do I want? Yeah.
The
that's
criminal
problem
or the
with West Wing.
psycho?
Is it totally spoils you because, yes, by the end of it, you think politics could be like that. And the reality is we're all sinful humans, and it ain't never going to be like that. So
It's a great science fiction show.
yeah, indeed. It is. So that's my little, I don't know what that is. What you're watching, I guess.
Yeah, I
what
guess
we're
so.
not watching, maybe.
You can
What
give
we're
it
not watching.
You know what? If you haven't watched The West Wing, give it a try. I don't know
Yeah.
where you can stream it now, but you can borrow one of Brian's box sets.
There you go. But not really, because I don't want to give it out, because it might not come back.
Okay.
Yeah. So recommendations.
Yeah, I do have it. Give it a try. Oddly enough, it's not any media thing, but it's wireless earbuds. So I love listening to podcasts. I love listening to music, and I've had a few wireless headphone sets over the last few years, the kind that are connected by a wire, and like I thought those would be better for me because you can just loop them around the back of your neck. You don't have to think about where you put them. I see people with their wireless earbuds. I know I'm way behind the curve on wireless earbuds, but I see them walking around with these little things sticking out of their ears, and I think there's no cord on those. You're going to lose it. It's going to drop out, and then you're out $200-300 or whatever people are paying for them these days. But I decided to give them a try because my current corded wireless earbuds, and they're connected to each other by a cord. They're not connected to the phone by a cord. They fitzed out over the winter break, so I did some Amazon research, and I bought a $25 pair of wireless earbuds. The teenagers at our church would probably make fun of me because they don't have the little lowercase b or the little Apple symbol on them. But holy cow, if this is the future, I'm in. The charging case. So my first thought would always be, well, I have to have some little case to carry them around in. And the case also charges them, which is so fantastic. And you can keep one charged while the other's in your ear, and you never have to worry about plugging them in. Because so I've had this thing, and I've been charging my earbuds off of it for the better part of a week now. I haven't plugged the charger back in, and it's still at 91% capacity. And it's just... holy cow. Like I said, if this is the future, I'm in. I'm always a late adopter. I didn't even get a smartphone until I think 5 years ago. But I feel silly about this one now because the wireless earbud thing is phenomenal. And I only paid $25 for them, so if I lose one, I don't feel as bad about that. I think I'd be too nervous to spend $300 on some actual name brand ones, though.
Yeah, there's actually good quality. They're not obviously the top of the line sound, but they're really good quality even at $20 to $30.
Yeah, it's crazy good.
Interestingly, Ben, I also have a headphone mention because I'm somewhat addicted to headphones because I listen to a lot of music, podcasts, and books pretty much all the time when I'm at home. Not so much even at church, even in my office, I'm listening to sermons or podcasts or things. Or
in
commentaries.
the 42 hours a week you spend on the elliptical.
Yeah, that too. But I'm always listening to something, so I'm kind of and what's funny is I always default back to the old-fashioned over-the-ear wired headphones because they're just...
You don't like stuff in your ears.
Yeah, I don't. And so, but I've tried various... I do have a pair of in-ear, like Ben just was talking about. I have a pair like that I use occasionally. But I actually just got for Christmas, Kathy got me a new technology that I didn't even know existed until the last few months. Bone conduction headphones.
Oh no.
So that they're not actually in your ear or on your ear, they're next to your ear. So they kind of conduct the sound through your cheekbone essentially into your ear. And I've just tried them out, and so I haven't really gotten long use out of them, so I don't know if they're going to cause me to have migraines or any weird side effects yet. But as a person who, let's just say, relies on my hearing to do navigation and things that you would be surprised at, I don't like my hearing completely blocked by headphones. And so I often walk around the house with one headphone on and that's it, or one earpiece in and that's it. These are cool because they don't restrict your hearing at all because they're not actually over your ears or in your ears. They're just kind of next to your ears. So I'm still playing around with them, but so far they're pretty cool and I like them. I didn't even know such technology existed, but bone conduction headphones, and yeah, we'll see.
I want my ears blocked off. I don't want to be able to hear ambient sound when I'm listening to stuff, but that makes total sense for you.
Right, right. Kathy a number of years ago got me a really cool pair of noise reduction headphones, like really high quality. And they're great on an airplane. I love listening to them on flights. I love when I get to sort of use them because you can disappear into the sound, the music, whatever it is, and it's wonderful. I cannot wear them around the house because I crash into things. I'm like a bat where I lose my radar or something, and I just start, I don't know. It's ridiculous because noise canceling headphones.
That's an interesting choice for you.
Yeah, it makes me Helen Keller, but in a good way.
Like,
I enjoy.
Hey, Kathy, why don't you try these headphones on that also block out your sight?
Right, exactly. It'd be like, yeah. So they're really cool. I like them, but I can only use them in very limited circumstances because, well,
that's really funny.
I need to be sitting still and not trying to navigate my way around my yard. Heaven forbid I wore those in my backyard. I'd end up in my pool for sure.
There's that scene in the Disney Peter Pan movie where Captain Hook asks for his set of hooks, and Smee brings out a box, and he's got all these different hooks for different occasions. Is it like that with you with headphones?
That is very much what I do. Exactly right. I have various headphone accessories for various situations, and it's ridiculous, but that's my life in that I'm always listening to something. So. And I'm very, I don't know what it is. I'm very conscious about my talking devices making noise around others and disturbing others. So I'm even, even with my, sometimes with my phone and other things, I'm putting a headphone even when I don't need it necessarily, just because I don't want to disturb somebody else in the room. So I have a huge variety of headphones that Kathy still mocks me because I can't stop buying headphones, and it's just kind of fun. So all different types of. So now I get a new variety, bone conduction. So we'll see how it works out.
I didn't know that those were like consumer grade yet. I'd heard about the technology. I didn't know you could already buy them. And for a blind guy, that's so fantastic. Because, I mean, even for like all those navigation programs you talk about, now you can hear street noise and hear your directions.
Right. So that's beautiful. It's one of the reasons that I want to try them out is because they really help with that kind of situation where you need to hear, but you also need the navigation from your phone or... so that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to get them is because it's tough for me to navigate safely because I don't want anything to cover my ears. And so with Rory, I never use headphones when I'm working with my guide dog because I got to rely on my ears as part of the safety to keep us both safe. So, yeah. So we'll see. It'll be kind of fun to explore.
Raise a glass to times past.
Raise a glass.
I don't have one. Do you have one?
Yeah, but you're not going to like it.
Oh, no.
You want me to skip it?
No, go ahead.
All right, so for Raise a Glass, our last Raise a Glass, I want to raise a glass to Ben Aquina because he made all this possible. This was initially his idea, the podcast. During the pandemic, we thought, what could we do creatively to connect with the church family and talk about some things that might be helpful to folks? And this was all Ben's idea, and he's done a ton of work. And the bumpers you hear and all the content you've listened to over the last 39 and a half episodes, that was motivated by Ben and sparked by Ben. And yes, I participated joyfully, but this would not be possible without Ben's efforts. And so my raise a glass is to him for getting all this done and for doing the majority of the workload. And so I appreciate that very much, and hopefully you all do too. But we're going to raise a glass to Ben Aquina whether he likes it or not, because he doesn't like being the center of attention. So tough for the moment because we're raising a glass to Ben.
Thank you, Brian. I won't say clink clink because that would imply that I'm also raising, and that'd be weird.
And he's not.
Yeah, I didn't really have one today, but I guess it makes sense for me to raise one back to you, Brian. Like,
You don't have to.
I'm going
No
to talk
pressure.
about this later in our main topic. No, in story segment. But one of the things that Kristen had to sort of break down for me several months ago is, Ben, wherever you do ministry next won't have a Brian. And that is a chilling thought because the guy sharing this podcast with me has been an amazing help, not just in the last 9 months, but in the 9 1/4 years preceding it. And it's going to be rough, Brian, doing ministry without you.
Indeed. I agree. Both sides. I'm going to have a hard time without Ben, but, we go forward and God provides somehow. So, in the meantime, we'll just be raising a glass to each other. So that's kind
Yeah.
of weird, but whatever.
Well, now we can clink because we are raising glasses to each other. But there's not enough time. I got this weird image in my head now of a really cheesy Oscar acceptance speech. This is not that, but there's so many people that I wish I could just do a segment about that have been amazing to me during the 10 years here. I don't want to start going into it because then this will get really long, but holy cow, there's so many people that deserve thanks and appreciation for what they've done for me personally, what they've done for my family, what they've done for me as a minister, how they helped me grow as a minister. I should stop now because it'll go on too long. But, man, appreciation is a weird thing. I feel weird right now.
It is indeed, but that's okay.
Okay, we
We're
should
allowed to
move
feel
on.
weird. Moving on.
I'm just grinding this thing to a halt.
Story time.
We could do stories next if you want.
Or not. Trivia.
Trivia.
I've only been doing this for 39 and a half times. I forget these
I was
things.
about to say you'll learn the order eventually, but no, not at this rate.
Not really.
Okay, trivia.
Trivia.
We have the question that was continuing from previous weeks. Tabletop Hall of Fame is the category. Question. In Monopoly, there are cards in the community chest and chance piles that will send a player directly to jail. What are the other two instructions printed on these cards? Hint, they both start with do not. And nobody emailed about this at all, but Randall Robinson in conversation did give me the correct answer. And the correct answer is, of course, do not pass go, do not collect $200. I thought this would be a question that we got 7 answers about.
It's far too easy.
Apparently, when Carrie Sampson said she hates Monopoly, there are several other people.
She means it.
Yeah, that feel the same way.
And my suggestions of do not commit adultery or do not covet were not the right answers.
I forgot Carrie Sampson didn't say she hates Monopoly. She said she hates board games.
Ah, she's more a generalist when it comes to hating games, not a specific.
I love board games, but I also hate Monopoly. Yeah. I guess, so we don't have a new question for next week, so we're moving on to stories.
Story time.
Story time, 'cause the lockdown is boring.
So, I thought it would be fun for story time to tell you how it all began long time ago in a universe far... No. In Modesto, 2010, we were looking for a director of modern worship, or as it was known then, contemporary worship, and also someone to kind of help out in some ways with our youth ministry at the time as sort of an assistant who would kind of be a secondary part of that in some way. And we were interviewing for a full-time position, and one of the applicants was a man named Ben Akina from Fresno, California. And it was my
Glamorous
job.
Fresno.
What's that?
Here in glamorous Fresno, California.
Ah, indeed.
Yeah.
Raising capital of the world, right?
Yeah.
I was tasked with sort of contacting applicants, I guess. And so reviewing resumes, I was part of a search team, and my job was to contact them, do an initial sort of conversation, and try to set up interviews with those that the team decided to interview. So I remember having a phone conversation for some reason at my house. I talked to one Ben Akina for the first time at the end of August 2010. And I remember that conversation being very helpful because I had gotten an okay impression of him on his resume, but talking with him was so much better and so much enlightening.
Well, I remember you
who he
said
was.
talking to me cleared up some things because on the resume I came off kind of pretentious.
Yeah. Yeah, surprisingly.
Yeah.
And it really helped me get a sense of his humble heart and his servant's heart. And that was a really important part of what I especially was looking for, but the team was looking for, was someone who could fit into a ministry context with humility and Christ-like character. And that was actually more important in some ways than actual job skills. And so I got a real sense of Ben's heart from that first conversation. And so it was really helpful. And then we invited him up for leading worship weekend first, right? Or an interview first?
It was, holy cow. I think it was an interview first.
Yeah, it was an interview first. And then that interview went so well that we invited him up to lead worship on a weekend. And that was an experience because, Ben way over prepared and way overwhelmed us with his preparedness.
And it was really a sign of my naivety and not really knowing how to work with a worship team that I hadn't built, because I'd only ever really worked with one worship team. It was back in Clovis, and it was a team where I'd trained most of the musicians up. And I was used to musicians looking to me and saying, Ben, I have no idea what I want to do here. And so I was like, okay, I don't want any person on any of these teams to not know what they should be doing from moment to moment. So I typed up a novel that had instructions for every song and for every team member for what they should do on each part of that song. And it was, I think I had the blinders on, because if I had been really looking around at the faces of the people I was talking to, I would have seen some incredulity there. Like, what are you talking about?
Incredulity, and from our drummer especially, you want me to read all this? And you want me to what? And he just was not accustomed to that, and it was rather off-putting to him, and it was a really weird situation, but it went well enough that we wanted Ben to come back for another interview.
You could at least definitely say this guy came in prepared.
Oh, yeah.
He tried. He's not lazy.
Yeah. And Ben has some memories of the interview because we interviewed with a team.
Yes, the nicest man in the world. And that's not my words. Those are Brian. Brian's words. Gene Frichtenick was in the room, and I just remember he had such a peaceful, serene smile as he was talking to me that it set me at ease, and at a time when I was really, really nervous. I think I mentioned this before. I'd been searching for work for 2 years. I had gotten 0 job interviews. This was the very first one, and I was very, very anxious and nervous. It was actually to the point where I was questioning my calling into worship ministry, because, God, I thought I heard a pretty clear voice from you saying you're supposed to do this, but nobody is calling me back. So I was very nervous, and Gene really set me at ease. And oddly enough, that was very helpful for me the day of. But the other interview person besides Brian was Insa Duke. And she was actually really helpful to me in the long term, because she was actually very intimidating in this meeting. And there was one point in particular I really remember where she asked me a question. I sort of flubbed through the answer, and she said, well, okay, but you didn't really answer my question. And then she rephrased the question. She didn't let me get away from it. And I'm a pretty meek guy, so you don't have to try very hard to intimidate me, but I really appreciated that later on, not even as I got to know her better, but just as I got to become more involved with the church and realize, she was doing a very important job of protecting the church from a potentially weak candidate. And it got me thinking about, that's the role of a person on one of these interview teams. If you're hiring somebody to work at your church, you should grill them a little bit. You should make sure, it's not your job to just be friendly and make them feel good about themselves. No offense, Gene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They worked well together, though. That was part of why
Yes.
I liked that interview team, was because they complemented each other. Gene was great in the short term, in the moment, and Insa was really good to kind of, be a bit harder edged to ask the harder questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you need both.
Yeah.
So
And I don't want to give the wrong impression. She was smiling while she was talking to me. She wasn't just being outright mean. She didn't have a gavel.
yeah,
Yeah.
it would have been fun if she had a gavel, though. I
Yeah.
would have enjoyed that. But,
But it was a while before I felt really comfortable around her because I've generally pretty low self-esteem, and so anybody even disagreeing with me in public, I often feel like, oh, that person hates me.
and Ben may
That's
not remember
far from
this
the truth.
part, but 3 months after he started, or like 3.5 months after he started, he helped me in February of 2011. Because I'm a freak, I remember these things. I was preaching a sermon on heaven, and we structured the entire service with worship songs and readings and song introductions and a few other scriptures, and it all just kind of worked together in a beautiful theme and a beautiful I don't even know how to describe it. It was just
There was a very distinct and intentional thematic flow to the service.
yeah, and Insa was the first one to be just overjoyed by that and to give us encouragement after the service, because she had never really experienced something like that. And for her, that was a confirmation that Centenary had chosen the right person, and that he and I could work together really well. And that
I didn't know
was
she had made the
evidence of that.
connection from that service.
Yeah,
That's cool.
That was one of the first people to come up to me and write. I think she wrote an email even about how appreciative she was of that effort that we put into that.
Here's
So-
the part I do remember about INSA as regards to that service. On Wednesday night when you were teaching your Bible study class, the class was starting, and she stood up and said, "Brian, can I just say?" And you said, "No."
Yes, I regularly said that to Insa. No, because Insa just saying would be, challenging.
Yeah.
She's like a sister to me, so I have to harass her too.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so that was Ben was offered the job in mid-October 2010.
I do want to back up a little bit, though,
Oh, yeah.
because after the first worship leading weekend, at that point, I already knew you guys had been without a worship director for some time, and you'd been, trying out. You'd tried out, I think, one other candidate, but you were. It was a struggle to try and keep worship teams on stage every weekend and try to manage volunteers. In addition to you were taking over that area, right? In addition
Yeah.
to your regular job.
Yeah, so I was managing this whole area of trying to get volunteers and worship leaders, and it was not easy to do it at the time. And we actually interviewed 5 candidates, but only 2 of them we wanted to invite back to lead worship. And so it was not easy.
And the weekend I was there for my first worship leading sample, I remembered saying to Brian, I know you guys are having trouble filling this area. I'll come back for another weekend, whether I get this job or not. If you just want me to lead worship and, you want to have one less person to figure out, I'd be happy to do this again. This was a great experience. And it felt like months went by, and I didn't hear anything from Centenary, and I was starting to get really resentful. And then I got another phone call from Brian saying, "Oh, hey, we want to have you back. And, are you free to do another worship leading weekend like you talked about?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, of course." And, we started planning things. And I remember complaining to Kristen behind your back. I was like, you know what? It's clear they're not going to hire me. Why are they having me back just to lead worship for them when they're going in another direction? It's really kind of a slap in the face. And Kristen was like, "Ben, you told them to do it." I was like, oh, I guess you got a good point there.
Yeah, and Ben had not known Centenary and how things move pretty slowly at Centenary.
I know now.
So I wasn't really allowed to communicate with him, "Hey, you're a number 1 candidate and we're going to have you back." I wasn't really given that freedom to do that because things move very slowly at Centenary and things were taking their time.
Deliberately, let's say.
And it was about a month. It was about a month to 6 weeks. It wasn't, it
I think it
felt
was about
like
a year
a
and a
lot
half.
longer to Ben, but it was about 4 to 6
To
weeks.
Ben, who was working as a substitute teacher, it felt long.
Yes. Ben, again, this whole time he's working as a substitute teacher, and that was a grind for him. And he and Kristen both were longing for a full-time position where he could, flourish in his gifts of ministry. And so it took a while.
Do
but-
work that I found meaning in.
So that second visit, he wasn't really expecting much, if I remember, from that, right?
Yeah, and then after church that day, you said, "Hey, you should come into this room." And we sat down and,
And there was a job offer, and he wasn't prepared for that job offer, and thus he said, "Can I take some time to think about it?"
And I think Brad's response was, "Okay."
"Fine, if you have to."
Yeah. And I believe I said, "Pray about it."
Oh, yeah, pray about it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. You did.
One thing I've never told you is that ended up having a lot of phone conversations, setting up those two, setting up the job interview, setting up the two worship services, because we did a lot of planning before each of those. And you would frequently, at the end of our phone conversations, say, well, my friend, have a good one. I'll talk to you later. And I remembered thinking, like, I'm not going to call him my friend because I'd really like that guy to be my friend. And I don't want to get my hopes up.
Where I saw the potential already, and I apparently was predicting the future or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't know that. And Ben, I believe when you accepted the job, we had gotten you a hotel, I think.
Yeah.
The first couple times you were here.
Springfield Marriott.
But after that, he stayed with us for a little bit, Kathy and I, when he was first coming to Modesto, because he took a while for them to move here. So
my wife was still completing grad school, and she couldn't just up and move, and we didn't have a place to live yet. So for my first month on the job, I was coming to town for Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays to do work, and then I would go back to Fresno where I lived, and then I would come back for the weekend. So Tuesdays were staff meetings, Wednesday night was church or youth group, and then I'd obviously have to come back for the Saturday and Sunday service. And while I didn't have a place to live, I didn't want the church to be paying for a hotel. I couldn't afford a hotel, so Brian arranged for me to stay with some different people from around the church. I stayed with Brian a couple times. I stayed with the fantastic Rice family. I stayed with, I believe, the Frichtenick family as well, and that was really cool.
Yeah,
it was a good way to get to know a small group, a small amount of the Centenary people, and then there were familiar faces when I'd be on campus, and it was really great.
Yeah, so that's how it all started in 2010, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Just over 10 years ago. So thankful that God arranged all that and that it worked out so well for 10 plus years. So there you go.
Main topic.
Which leads us into our main topic, sort of, kind of.
Very bittersweet right now.
I know.
Yeah.
So our main topic today, we want to talk about new beginnings because it's rather appropriate, timing-wise, to talk about new beginnings.
You mean the time of the year?
Yeah, the time of the year. For the guy who hates making New Year's resolutions and never does it, I'm not going to go there and say that. I don't do the New Year's resolution stuff, but new beginnings in the season of Centenary, and new beginnings for ministry here, and new beginnings for Ben Aquina and Kristen Aquina and Isaiah as they begin their new season of life and ministry in Visalia. So I want to talk about new beginnings because it is a lot in the Bible about new beginnings, believe it or not.
Yeah, and Brian mentioned new beginnings at Centenary. That was sort of snuck into the list, and it's really easy to look at this as the conclusion of something at Centenary, but Centenary ministries are going to continue, and they're going to have to necessarily change because I feel weird saying this, but I'm a key figure in some of the ministries of Centenary Church, and it would be really, really difficult and honestly kind of silly to try to do them exactly the way that they were done while I was here. It's really important for the life of this church that things do change and develop, and the people taking over those ministry areas find their way that works for them. And
yeah, and we as humans, we don't like new when it comes to...
I hate new.
Yeah, and so at this time of year, sometimes we get new clothes or new toys or new fun things for Christmas, and that's okay, we like that, but we don't like new realities, new life transitions, new places to live, new jobs, change. When it comes with that,
the word "new" is conflicting because there's good sides and bad sides to it. The word "change" is usually much more black and white.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but in the Bible, it's pretty clear that new is part of God's plan. A lot of times, in order for things to move forward, there has to be some change, some transition, something new, and often God will call us out of something old and bless us even more so with something new.
It's really easy for us to take our knowledge of the Bible, even just the Sunday school stories, and think of, Joseph did amazing things in Egypt, David did amazing things as the king of Israel, Daniel did amazing things as a dignitary in Babylon. But it's really important to remember that there was a time when that new direction started and none of that stuff was established, when none of those guys knew what it would look like, and they were just looking at the bare facts of the situation they were in. And one of the guys I have to think of is Jacob. Now, Jacob is known as not one of the best intentioned people in the Bible. Definitely stole his brother's birthright, but I'm always struck just by the starkness of his life in the short season that followed that. Esau pretty much said, I'm not going to kill you while our dad's alive. And then dad died. Jacob
Yeah.
had to leave. And it talks about him having a rock for a pillow when he went out into the wilderness. To me, that means he had nothing in the world to his name. Like, if I've got a coat, I'm rolling it up and using that as a pillow
Yeah,
instead of a
he's
rock.
got nothing. Yeah.
And, to think about, yeah, we know what happened to Jacob. We know that he became wealthy when he was working for Laban. We know that he had this vast family, and his family brought him to Egypt, and he became a person of renown and respect. But he couldn't see that when his head was resting on a rock.
Right.
And there's no way he could have. And it's really important to remember what kept these biblical figures going when they didn't have anything, and they didn't have the Bible to read. They don't know what's going to happen next for them. And you think about Daniel. We know Daniel as the lion's den guy, but there was a time when all he knew was that his country had fallen, and he had been exiled into a distant land as a captive in Babylon, and that was all he knew at the time.
As a young man, I mean, his entire world had shifted and changed in a very difficult, negative way. And he did not know the end of the story. And so he had to choose how he was going to handle this new reality. And I think that's the key. Is
Small choices every day,
Small
Brian.
choices every day. Someone says that way too much. But that's the key, is what choices does he make? What choices do you see Jacob making and Joseph making and all these biblical characters? Because they're in a new situation, a new reality, and they're not lamenting the old. They're not stuck in the past. They're not willing to let themselves, as much as they grieve the past maybe, or losing whatever they had lost, they didn't allow
They're not
that.
stuck dwelling on the shattered dreams. Like,
Yeah.
Daniel probably wanted to marry somebody in Israel, probably wanted to have whatever passes for a career in pre-Christ Israel. He definitely had plans for his life.
Well, yeah, and he had been living in the Promised Land, and that alone
Yeah.
would have been. But now he's exiled away from the Promised Land, away from Jerusalem, away from all he had known. And at that point, how do you handle the new? Well, he chooses to trust Yahweh, continue to worship Yahweh, and continue to follow Yahweh, despite all the evidence around him that Yahweh is either not there or not powerful enough to save his people. But no, the reality was Yahweh allowed all to happen. It's part of his plan. And Daniel had to trust that and choose to walk forward with that remarkable faith that helped him to embrace the new and realize it was an opportunity to trust God and to live out his days in a way that showed such amazing trust and faith in the Lord.
Yeah.
And if you look at all these characters we just mentioned, Jacob, same thing. He had the trust that the Lord would provide and walk forward in faith. Joseph, in exile, in prison in Egypt for doing nothing wrong, had to, on a regular basis, trust the Lord and focus on one day at a time, one choice at a time, essentially, and know that God would somehow provide, and that faith would be what carried him forward.
King David's another guy that, we could definitely look at a situation where he was faced with his dreams not coming true. I mean, this is a guy that had already been... It's easy to remember David as the great king of Israel. David as the great warrior, killed the giant. It's really important for us to remember that there were years where he spent in exile as a fugitive from justice, living in caves. And it'd be really easy for him to look around at his circumstances and say, whatever I thought God had planned for me is clearly not the way of it. I was met by a prophet once that anointed me king. Now the guy wearing the crown is trying to murder me.
Yeah, and that went on for years. And so the new beginning for David was quite a long stretch of trusting the Lord and walking by faith, even when there was no external evidence or circumstances that would encourage that. He had to continue to have faith in the midst of that because God was doing something. It just was in God's timing, not David's. I think that's the way it works for a lot of us. A new beginning is not necessarily a 1 day or a 1 hour sort of reality. Sometimes it's a season where there's a springtime where things are going to take a while to grow, and they're going to be little seeds, and then they're going to be, showing some growth, but there's not a lot there, and it's a really hard time for quite a while. And I think that's sometimes the way it works. Is the bulbs that are planted throughout the winter, they appear to be dead, but they're not. They're growing. Then they burst into the beginnings of life in the spring, but it's not until much later that you actually see the results. You see the evidence, you know. So new beginnings can be a stretch of time, a season, and I think we need to embrace that and understand that. And then how we handle them. We don't lament the loss. We don't lament the past. We can remember it. We can grieve it. We can, you know, of course, hold on to it. Memories are great, but they shouldn't paralyze you from making future choices and present choices to embrace this new reality. Whatever God may have planned, you know, we step out into it in faith. So this season, actually Christmas, we just came out of Advent, Christmas, and one of the characters we often talk about is Joseph, the husband of Mary, and that guy, talk about new beginnings. It didn't
talk
go
about shattered plans.
Yeah, shattered dreams, shattered plans. Not the way he had intended his betrothal to go, to have a suddenly pregnant Mary by a miraculous conception. Yeah, that was pretty tough. And I've always been fascinated by the words in Matthew 1, where basically he's described as a great man of faith, a devout man, and he responds to the angelic message of what's going on with obedience. He doesn't question it. He doesn't challenge it. He just does what he's commanded to do. He walks forward in faith, even though this is a new beginning that he didn't necessarily choose and he wasn't prepared for in a lot of ways, but yet he embraced it and did not, you know, lament the loss or lament the past. He chose to embrace this opportunity, and from that point on,
his act of faith is truly comparable in pretty much every way to Mary.
mm-hmm.
Like, she gets a lot more attention than he does, I think, but I think they're equally deserving of praise for this.
Yeah.
And
Huge.
I think about Saul of Tarsus. Like, this is a guy that believed he was following God, that believed he was doing the right thing, that was a fervent supporter of what he believed God was calling him to do. And then he finds himself blind and essentially captured. And yeah.
Yeah, and if you remember that new beginning, that was a pretty dramatic new beginning on the road to Damascus.
Yeah.
He spent 3 days fasting and praying and being experienced blindness, and I think that was intentional because God took away the one thing that he had relied on to read the scriptures, to lead the charge against the early church. All those things were empowered by his sight. God took that away and said, okay, now you're going to be totally dependent on those to take care of you for these 3 days, for you just to be humbled. And then the new beginning went on for years of preparation. Before he became the Paul that we know from the book of Acts and beyond, he had to go through, you know, an unknown number of years of preparation and sort of grasping the grace of God in a way that was life-changing for him. So a new beginning can be very dramatic at times and have a point in time and a milestone sort of thing, but it also can be a season at the same time.
And I think about how we talked about some of these people having plans and dreams for their lives that are clearly not going to come true the way they wanted. I think, you know, the Daniel story most poignantly speaks to me about this. And it'd be really easy for a person in that situation to look at their new circumstance and say, okay, I thought God was watching out for me. Clearly God doesn't exist. And instead they say, okay, I thought God was watching out for me. Clearly I misread his intentions of what he specifically wants to do with my life. But, you know, the faithfulness and character of God, they recognize through their faith in that moment that hasn't changed. I think that's really important.
And I think that's the key is the Psalm 37:4 verse always comes to me at moments like this, because you delight yourself in the ways of the Lord and he will grant you the desires of your heart. And that verse always helps me because you got to start with delighting yourself in the Lord. You know the Lord's character. You get to know the Lord. You spend a lot of time with the Lord and the people of the Lord and the word of the Lord, all that. And then your heart's desires are transformed and your heart's desires will be fulfilled. But it's because you've aligned yourself so closely with the character of God. And so whatever the future brings, you'll be delighted with it because you're following the Lord's heart. You're following the guidance of the Lord, and you're so closely linked that even if it's not quite the way you expected it to be or planned it to be 10 years earlier or 20 years earlier or whatever, it's good, and you can be fulfilled, and faith always leads to that kind of reward if you continue on to trust the Lord. But it's sometimes a journey that's pretty long and unexpected turns and twists and all that good stuff.
If this whole conversation we're having sounds kind of familiar, it's because we're pretty much plagiarizing from Hebrews 11. It's commonly referred to as the Hall of Faith. And a lot of the people we're talking about are mentioned that specific passage as people who were driven forward just by their reliance on God and by their faith in God. And it's a really important passage to read and to know. So please give it a try.
Yeah. So Hebrews 11 is a great example because by faith is repeated over and over again. By faith, they accomplished or did or whatever. It was because they trusted the Lord enough to step out in faith. And walking by faith is a step-by-step, little choice at a time process. It's not the giant leaps of faith that we would like to think about sometimes. It's the daily little choices that make a big difference. So new beginnings are a good opportunity to kind of embrace this and to remember that God will provide and guide, but you have to do your part of stepping out in faith and walking by faith and daily, hour by hour, sometimes making the choices that reflect that faith reality and not giving up and not heading in despair and not throwing up your hands and saying, well, I guess that's not the way it's going to go. I think so often in ministry, it's tempting to just go, well, we can't ever do ministry again because, well, Ben Akina's moving away, so that's it. But in some cases, the new reality is going to be good, and we need to continue to trust the Lord with that. And
yeah, you talked about that. It's not connected to me specifically, but Spirit Salon, the fact that they're having an online session is an amazing act of faith.
Yeah. Spirit Salon, if you think about it, has been in-person meetings since 1974. And they have a group of women who just have led that group so faithfully and so well. But when all this began, they couldn't conceive of not meeting in person. Like that was so big of an obstacle. They just technologically...
If you're not meeting in person, it doesn't count.
Right.
It's not real.
Right. It wasn't on their radar ever to meet other than in person because none of them could conceive of a time when technology would be accessible enough to the majority of their women because, let's face it, the average age of Spirit Salon is not 25, and so technology can be a
They're
challenge.
in an age bracket that are not typically tech adopters.
Right. If they use tech, it's in a limited fashion, not a full-on embracing of tech like someone in their 20s. And so for them, it was a big challenge and a big obstacle. But I've watched them with such joy as they have trusted the Lord and walked forward with faith. Baby steps at times. Other times they were taking bigger steps of faith to say, we're going to try this Zoom thing, whatever this is. And a lot of them had never heard of Zoom before August, September of 2020. But they really have embraced it, and they've done very well at sort of bringing each other along. And those who weren't capable of necessarily learning the technology on their own, they've had so many sisters who've helped them and friends who helped them. And it's been so encouraging to me from afar to watch as they've embraced this and made it work. And they're doing great. And I'm so excited to be a part of them in January here and being a part of that. It's not my ideal method of teaching the Bible over Zoom. It definitely isn't, but it's what God is allowing us and equipping us to do right now. So let's embrace it with joy, and it's a new way. And some of those benefits, they've had women a part of their group who are not living in Modesto anymore, who've moved away, and because of it being on Zoom now, they can participate. Or
awesome.
They're temporarily one of the big coordinators of the Zoom technology, Donna Darnell, was living in Tahoe last fall when she was coordinating the group. So Ro and Donna were big helpers in getting Spirit Salon Zoom capability, and they weren't even in Modesto to do it. So that's one of the benefits and blessings of this is you can involve people who aren't comfortable being in person or couldn't be in person even if you had that option. So sometimes when you walk forward in faith and understand this new beginning can bring some unusual blessings, it really does surprise you, and it's a delight along the way at times as well. So that's a way to talk about this. I think that's been my struggle from the beginning of all this pandemic stuff, is not viewing it as a problem but as an opportunity. And that's something that I think as we have new beginnings, that's the key, is keeping that attitude of, I'm going to trust the Lord through this. It's an opportunity for God to do something new and God to bless me in a way that maybe I didn't expect or didn't plan, but it's still going to be God's presence and God's blessing, and that's a great thing.
And thinking about moving forward, we talked before about how ministries are going to change here. The way Centenary does things, that's going to change as well. And I really want to ask anybody listening to consider what part God is calling you to have in the new thing. And any degree of technological ability is something that can be used. There are already people that have stepped forward and will be helping out with some video editing stuff, with some online service stuff. And I'm so grateful for those people. And I'm sure there are other people out there that have areas of giftedness that could be of help moving forward. And maybe that'll be a new amazing thing for your life. I mean, I am only in this career because a good friend of mine in college wouldn't stop nagging me to play guitar at her church. And it truly changed my life in the most important sense of the word. And so maybe that's going to be your path as well. Not necessarily to full-time ministry, but definitely to something fulfilling in a way that you're helping your church. And if it's not you specifically, but you know somebody that does have some sort of ability that could help out, maybe you're supposed to be the nagging friend in their life that gets them to just take that first step and find out what God can do through their ability.
Yeah, exactly. So trust the Lord enough to take the initiative to start with prayer. We need all of you to be praying for Centenary and praying for God to provide, and
Absolutely.
praying for Ben and Kristen as they move on to something, a new adventure for them. Just prayer is the first step. And then, yeah, if you have an interest or just want to ask some questions even, contact me. And if you know of somebody or have some interest yourself, we'll find a way to plug in. So definitely, I think it starts with all of us taking a step of faith and seeing what God does.
One last word before we go.
One last word before we go.
The last word of this here podcast needs to be Ben Aquino because, like I said earlier, he's been the architect behind the scenes, and I'm so appreciative of all that. And we've really enjoyed doing this, and hopefully you've enjoyed listening to this. And so I'm going to leave Ben with the last word.
Well, no pressure.
No pressure.
Thanks for the advance warning.
Yeah, you know, that's the way I roll.
All I can say is thank you. Thank you to Brian for hosting this thing with me, for being the kind of supportive person, for training me in so many different ways. I feel so much more equipped as a minister and as a human being because of my working relationship and my personal relationship with you. That's been amazing. Thank you to Centenary for hiring me for this position when I really ultimately wasn't qualified to do it at the time I got hired, and for the trust and support that I've experienced over the years. Thank you, baby Jesus. Thank you, adult Jesus. Thank you, God, Holy Spirit. Thank you. Can we stop?
We can stop now, Ben.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Love you guys. Bye-bye.
With your